Hello, my name is Cassandra Exum, and I'm presenting climate change from the position of the United Nations. This is on behalf of myself, Alicia Faxon, Tia Juby, and Sarah Van Acker. So, climate change can be defined as a change of climate that is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere, and that is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. This definition of climate change comes from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and as you can see, it acknowledges both the natural and human causes in climate change. So, addressing climate change. In 1992, the UN family produced the UNFCCC, with the aim of the Convention preventing dangerous human interference with the climate system. 3 years later, countries began to strengthen the global response to climate change and adopted the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, which legally binds developed country parties to emission reduction targets. And finally, we have the Paris Agreement, which aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, there are 6 official UN bodies working on climate change. The IPCC is the leading international body for the assessment of climate change and provides a clear scientific view on the current state of knowledge in climate change and its potential environmental and socioeconomic impacts. The UNFCCC stands as the main intergovernmental negotiation forum, and the Green Climate Fund is a body within the financial sector of the UNFCCC and catalyzes and channels financial resources to developing countries to enable implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation measures. The UNEP functions as a voice for the environment within the UN and advocates for the wise use and sustainable development of the global environment. Next, we have the UNISDR, which supports efforts within the UN system in the area of disaster preparedness and mitigation due to climate change. Finally, the WMO coordinates the international monitoring of meteorological patterns, including those indicative of climate change. These bodies and instruments exist to combat the effects and impacts of climate change. The effects of climate change can look like changes in Arctic temperatures and ice, precipitation amounts, ocean salinity, wind patterns, and aspects of extreme weather. These long-term changes can be observed at continental, regional, and ocean basin scales, and extreme weather may include droughts, heavy precipitation, heat waves, and intensity of tropical cyclones. The impacts of these effects are global in scale. The impact of climate change is affecting coastal cities at an alarming rate. Across the globe, hundreds of millions of people live in areas that will be affected by rising seawater levels caused by global warming. Climate change can have a negative impact on infrastructure, as it may limit access to basic needs of the population. For example, government facilities and other social services, which are mostly located in urban areas, which in turn affect the quality of life of the population. The urban poor will also be highly affected by the changing climate. In most developing countries, the poor live in slums or makeshift shanty towns along rivers and on hillsides. These areas can become prone to landslides, flooding, and high levels of pollution that are also impacts and effects of climate change. As climate change begins to alter weather and temperature across the globe, the impact will alter plant and animal life, and we will see a decline in the number and range of species that define biodiversity. This decline will impact not only current ecosystems, but also future ecosystems. Recent studies have shown that climate change has altered the production levels of crops and their suitability from Asia, America, to Europe, and this has impacted the main agricultural crops grown, and they have affected the typical local crops cultivated in certain climates. As global temperatures increase, we will see an even greater loss across the globe of agricultural products. Livestock production, as well as fisheries and aquaculture, will also be impacted negatively with the increase in temperature from global warming. The increase in temperature will cause physiological processes, changes in livestock that will detrimentally affect the feeding and growth of animals. Climate change will cause a shortage of fish growth and production in many regions of the world as the ocean temperatures increase, the rapid degradation of key ecosystems will occur. The effect on land and ocean biodiversity is far-reaching. This will affect all ecosystems and humanity's ability to properly feed a population that increases daily. Overall, climate change negatively influences food and, in turn, national security through its effects on food availability, quality, access, and distribution. Climate change will have adverse effects in other areas of humanity as well. Health, key economic sectors and services, tourism, and energy systems will all be impacted. Human health is affected by the rapid changing climate and the stresses that it induces in the human body. The healthcare system is at times unable to manage the changes in the magnitude and/or pattern of climate-sensitive health outcomes that can be attributed to air quality, vector-borne disease, and temperature-related deaths. Key economic sectors and services are also impacted by climate change, like tourism, energy systems, and transportation. The global tourism sector's impact is far-reaching and not only affects investors, but also the communities in which the destination lies. Coastal erosion, coral reef bleaching, heat waves, wildfires, reduced snowfall are all things that impact tourism, and we are seeing a greater increase in the development of what tourism sector calls last chance to see destinations. These are places in which travelers visit certain destinations before they disappear. In the energy system sector, there's an increased demand for air conditioning units in regions where units were not previously necessary. Impacts on energy systems can further impact the GDP of the country. For example, the economic damage in the U.S. from climate change is estimated to be roughly 1.2% of GDP per year per 1 degree Celsius increase. Transportation is yet another sector where we would see an impact. Roads, air travel, rail, shipping, and pipeline transportation can be either directly or indirectly impacted by the rapid increase or decrease in global temperature. This would then have a ripple effect on previously mentioned sectors such as food and availability of those living in rural areas to travel into urban zones to access services. Our goal as the United Nations is to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals set out in 2015 are met in an effort to stop new and reverse existing climate change. The solution is the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals to transform our world. The Division for Sustainable Development Goals in the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs supports the Sustainable Development Goals. UN offices are based in New York City and take on the responsibility of drafting reports on sustainable development to be used at conferences and other global events, and aid developing nations with capacity building to gauge their developmental progress and identify areas where they may need assistance. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all UN member states in 2015 and is under the umbrella of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. This agenda led to the creation of 17 goals, which were diplomatically agreed upon by member states and aimed at reducing the impact of global change and increasing overall sustainability. The goals view poverty as the biggest obstacle to sustainable development and aim to start with the eradication of poverty globally so that no one will be left behind. The United Nations recognizes the importance of economic, social, and environmental sustainability, which is reflected in the goals. The most relevant of these goals to climate change are number 2, zero hunger, number 6, clean water and sanitation, number 7, affordable and clean energy, number 11, sustainable cities and communities, number 12, responsible production and consumption, and number 13, climate action, as well as number 15, life on land. Number 2, zero hunger, is the end of hunger, achieving food security and improving nutrition and promoting sustainable agriculture. The world should strive to double the agricultural productivity and incomes of small-scale producers, and such production should be made sustainable and adaptable to drastic climate change and natural disaster. The UN will work with agricultural experts to ensure genetic diversity of seeds so as not to be reliant on or limited or potentially susceptible crops. All of this will be done with a particular focus on underdeveloped areas to bring them into agricultural sustainability. Number 6, clean water and sanitation ensures availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. All people should have access to clean water and hygiene without fear of contamination from open defecation. Poverty should be reduced and an end to the dumping of hazardous materials is needed. Issues of water scarcity and water source management will be addressed and water-related ecosystems will be protected. All of this will be accomplished while working with local communities to educate leaders and the masses on sustainability. Number 7, affordable and clean air energy ensures access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Renewable energy should take the place of much of traditional sources of degrading energy, which will involve investment in appropriate resources and technology. Again, specific focus will be placed on developing countries who may lag behind. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities make cities and human developments inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Improving access to sustainable transport is essential in confronting the greenhouse gas issue. This involves ensuring cultural and heritage sites are protected, human settlements are sustainable, a focus on air quality and human waste in cities, the creation of green spaces, preparation for climate change, and specific attention on poor nations. Number 12, responsible production and consumption. The world needs the sustainable management of Earth's resources. Such a goal includes having a food waste globally, proper disposal of chemicals and waste, increasing recycling, education to the masses, specifically in science and technology, the creation of monitoring tools, particularly for impact of tourism, and the addressing of taxation and subsidies to account for the role of fossil fuel use. Number 13, climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. All nations should incorporate planning and policies which consider the impacts of climate change and as such should invest in preparing for natural events and disasters. Mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning will all need to be given attention. Wealthier countries will give a combined $100 billion annually to aid less developed nations in the process. And finally, number 15, life on land. Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Deforestation must be targeted and reversed through reforestation around the world. Similarly, degraded soils should be repaired and future degradation prevented. Biodiversity should be preserved, requiring the elimination of poaching and other activities which are disruptive to flora and fauna, including invasive species. It is the hope of the UN that the completion of these goals will lead to the slowing of climate change and lead to a more sustainable future. The solution we propose is the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals which were agreed upon. A summit will be held in September 2019, led by Secretary General Antonio Guterres, which will bring together political leaders with the private sector and civil society and will focus on the sectors which pose the most immediate risk to climate change. Future events like this summit should be used to ensure progress is being made on the Sustainable Development Goals. Additional solutions can be search for combating climate change. It's important to not only look at the Sustainable Development Goals, but also at quickly emerging technology, such as methane hydrate deposits, to find unique solutions to combat climate change with efficient energy sources. The UNEP, or the United Nations Environmental Program, published a study in order to promote a basis for rigorous assignment and to enable sound policy discourse and choices for each of the UN's countries. In this study, we are looking at methane hydrate deposits, or frozen heat. Methane hydrate is a crystalline solid that consists of a methane or greenhouse gas molecule surrounded by a cage of interlocking water molecules. In some parts of the world, they are much closer to high population areas than any natural gas field. These nearby deposits might allow countries that currently import natural gas to become self-sufficient. The current challenge is to inventory this resource and find safe, economical ways to develop it. With its potential energy output, India, Japan, Korea, and other countries are engaged in the development of new mining techniques in order to utilize methane hydrate as a possible fuel source. Considering that methane hydrates only form under very specific conditions, it is conceivable that climate change, which includes warming of the oceans, could affect the stability of gas hydrates. Despite the fact that methane hydrate is controversial due to the danger that climate change presents, the UNEP is looking at energy outflow potential, which could reduce carbon emissions significantly. We also looked at refrigerant management. The problem is, every refrigerator, supermarket case, and air conditioner contains chemical refrigerants that absorb and release heat, making it possible to chill food and keep buildings and vehicles cool. Refrigerants, specifically CFCs and HCFCs, were once key culprits in depleting the stratospheric ozone layer, which is essential for absorbing the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Ozone depletion substances are regulated as Class 1 or Class 2 controlled substances. Class 1 substances have a higher ozone depletion potential and have been completely phased out in the U.S. With a few exceptions, this means no one can produce or import Class 1 substances. Class 2 substances are all HCFCs, which are transitional substitutes for many Class 1 substances. New production and import of most HCFCs will be phased out by 2020. The most common HCFC is used today in HCFC22 or R22, a refrigerant still used in existing air conditioners and refrigerant equipment. The United Nations Development Program, UNDP, is an implementing agency for the 1987 Montreal Protocol, which is an international environmental agreement to protect the Earth's ozone layer by eliminating ODSs. The UNDP services has currently eliminated 67,870 tons of ODS while reducing 5.08 billion tons of CO2. Acting as the leading agency in 29 countries, the UNDP has been instrumental in the implementation of the HCFC or R22 phase-out plans. And finally, we have NASA. NASA is one of 13 U.S. government agencies that form part of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, which has a legal mandate to help the nation and the world understand, assess, predict, and respond to global change. These U.S. partner agencies include the Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Energy, each of which has a different purview depending on the area of expertise. NASA conducts a program, the Global Climate Change, that consists of breakthrough research on climate science, enhancing the ability of the international scientific community to advance global integrated Earth system science using space-based observations. The agency's research encompasses solar activity, sea level rise, the temperature of the atmosphere and the oceans, the state of the ozone layer, air pollution, and changes in sea and land ice. Started in 2010, NASA's Carbon Monitoring System is a forward-looking initiative established under direction by the U.S. government. The CMS is improving the monitoring of global carbon stocks, where carbon is stocked around the planet, and fluxes, how carbon is cycled from one stock to the next. The ultimate goal is to make breakthroughs in quantifying, understanding, and predicting how worldwide carbon sources and sinks are changing, since this could have major ramifications for how our planet will respond to increasing emissions and/or efforts to combat climate change. The work will also help inform near-term policy development and planning. By maintaining a fleet of Earth science spacecraft and instruments in orbit, which study all aspects of the Earth system, oceans, land, atmosphere, biosphere, cryosphere. With more planned for launch in the next few years, NASA is able to more effectively map the ongoing atmospheric changes as they occur. This leads to an increased understanding of the universe and the ability to create more effective solutions for emerging technology. For instance, instruments on NASA's Terra and Aqua satellites have provided the first global measurements of aerosols in our atmosphere, which come from natural sources such as volcanoes, dust storms, and man-made sources such as the burning of fossil fuels. Other instruments on board the AURA satellite study the processes that regulate the abundance of ozone in the atmosphere. NASA's main role is to make detailed climate data available to the global community. And here we have our bibliography. Thank you so much.